Welcome to AppStories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Things from Cultured Code, who is also sponsoring all of our WWDC coverage this year, as well as Linode. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is the editor-in-chief of MacStories.net, Mr. Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Well, I can see that because you're in front of me.
Exactly. This is very unusual. I think this is the first time you and I have ever recorded in person with AppStories.
Yes, it is true.
And this is a very, very special episode. We've got something really exciting to share with everybody today, a very special interview.
In Italian, we would say it's a specialissimo episode.
Oh, I like that.
Yes.
I like that. Well, we're going to be talking about all the stuff that happened at WWDC all summer long.
Yes.
There were a lot of exciting announcements on Monday.
Really? You think so?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. There were a lot of great new apps, both on the Mac and iOS. So we'll go through some of those over the course of the summer.
There's just some new OS for iPad, but no big deal, really.
No big deal. But, we would like to talk about that, but we had a special opportunity, so we're going to talk with someone in a little while. But before we get to that, we'll introduce our guest in a minute. But I want to tell you a little bit about our friends at Cultured Code and their awesome app, Things. Because Things is a task manager that does an incredibly good job at balancing both a clean design and an ease of use and flexibility to let you get your projects in order and get things done. I love this app because it does an amazing job of creating all sorts of affordances for getting work done. Because for instance, you can go in and in your project, you can actually put in headers and organize that project and put your tasks in like separate lists within the project. It's just one of those little touches that I think is really good. And also if you do automation, they've got a URL scheme, they've got Siri shortcut integrations. You can do things like take a plain text list of tasks from drafts or another text editor, drop them in, and they become automatically individual tasks. It's really cool that way. Cultured Code has been working on their apps for years now, and they scale super well, all the way up from the Apple Watch, that tiny little screen, all the way up to a big screen iMac. It's amazing that the job they've been able to do with that. And I think it's really appropriate that they're the sponsor for WWDC because here's the thing. We got SwiftUI this week, and SwiftUI is designed to make that easy. You should check them out. If you haven't tried the app in a while and you tried it before, definitely check it out again because you know what? They've been adding a lot of features over the past year and really worth a look. If you've never tried it before, it's a great way to get your work done. You can check them out at thingsapp.com to learn more about Things on all the platforms. When you go there, you can download the Mac app as a free trial, and you can also go on the App Store and get their other apps. Thanks to Things for supporting the show. Things, where ideas take shape one step at a time. Okay, Federico, let's talk about our guest today.
Yes. What do you want to know?
Who are we going to talk to, or who are you going to talk to?
Well, yeah.
And when are we going to, and what are we going to talk about?
So an opportunity presented itself to be able to ask a few questions about some of the technical news from WWDC and the changes in iOS and especially iPadOS to Senior Vice President of Software Engineering at Apple, Craig Federighi. We all know him. He's the public face for everything related to software, iOS, macOS, and now iPadOS. And Apple was very kind to invite me to their podcast studio that they set up. They've been doing this for quite a few years at this point, actually. They have a podcast studio inside the convention center at WWDC. And so I was able to spend a few minutes with Craig and ask him a few questions for the show. So you will hear this special report from the field, from the convention center, where it was just an incredible experience, really. And I hope that I had so many questions, honestly, and it's really impossible to get to all of the super technical details, and especially because we just have the first beta of iPadOS, so a few things are really still in flux at this point. Right. So, but I think I was able to ask a few big picture questions, and I hope that it'll be a fun conversation. So that will be coming straight from the heart of the convention center, the podcast studio that Apple set up.
Yeah, I was really excited when I heard that you had the opportunity to do this interview. So it's really great. The other thing I really like about this is that, we just recently started a new show called Dialog, which you can go check out at dialogpodcast.net. And that show is all about doing interviews. Yeah. And at the time we said, we're not stopping doing interviews on AppStories. And as soon as we said that to the audience, we had an opportunity to do another interview, which is fantastic. So, this is going to be another in a long series of AppStories podcasts and interviews. And, I assume we're probably going to have a few more people listen to this show than maybe listen usually. And if you want to subscribe to AppStories, the best way, obviously you're listening to this, but please subscribe and check it out, and maybe listen to Dialogue too if you're interested in that.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I agree.
Right. Mm-hmm. All right, with that, Federico, I'm going to turn it over to you to interview Craig Federighi.
Let's do it. Hello and welcome to this very special segment of AppStories coming to you directly from WWDC. As we promised, we have a very truly special guest today. I guess you probably know him. He's the Senior Vice President of Software Engineering at Apple, Craig Federighi. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Hey, thank you very much.
So there's a few things that I would like to talk about. I don't know, iPad, maybe a few developer news. But before we get to that, I want to ask you, 30th WWDC, iOS version 13, macOS version 10.15. The iPad is going to turn 10 next year. It's quite a long period of time. Are you still having fun?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah?
Absolutely. No, this is a dream job. I first got into computers when I played with an Apple II when I was 10 years old. And when the Mac came out in 1984, I thought, I want to work at Apple someday. And amazingly, it turned out to be true. And this is my life.
Yeah.
Every year's a great year.
So it's quite a week, really. You had a few announcements. I would like to start talking about the developer side, the developer tools and technologies. Catalyst.
Yeah.
So this is the version 2 of a sneak peek that you gave last year with some of the built-in apps in Mojave. Now we have a new version of that project that developers can use. I believe you ported somewhere around 40 frameworks from iOS to the Mac. And so I kind of wanted to understand what do you hope to achieve with Catalyst, and what do you hope that developers will be able to build with Catalyst?
Yeah, over the years, of course, iOS in its earliest incarnations took a bunch of technologies out of macOS. Some of them they then reinvented in whole cloth to fit on really, at that time, resource-constrained mobile devices. And over time, we've been able to bring the platforms more and more together at a low level. I mean, first, all the details of mock, and then the security frameworks, and up the stack. But UIKit and AppKit always remain these two separate worlds. And depending on what a developer did, they could build an app that was sort of factored in a way that they shared a lot of cross-platform code. But they had to always take that extra step of having people on the team that knew AppKit, people on the team that knew UIKit, and make the decision to specialize for those two. And for many developers, they chose one or the other and not both, because that was a real effort to get the expertise and to make the investment. And when we look at what's happened with iOS and broadly, and now the iPad ecosystem, it's a big, vibrant ecosystem. And we see so many apps that are really fantastic on the iPad that I've wanted on the Mac, and instead, sometimes I end up using a website, or sometimes I don't have that functionality available at all. And we want to enable every one of those developers to bring that app to the Mac. And we also want to create a greater reason for a developer to go deep on iPad. If they say, hey, I've got an opportunity here. If I really make my iPad app deep, I support, and these days now, multiple documents open at once, all the kind of extended power functionality for iPad. That's also going to make it a great Mac app. So now we're going to get better iPad apps. We're going to get more Mac apps, better Mac apps. That seems great for developers and great for Mac users. And, for us, we at Apple are really focused on building the things that we want to exist in the world. It's sort of this privilege we get that what we work on is selfishly tools for ourselves and for our family and for our friends. And there are so many different experiences where I feel like I don't want to be using a web app on the Mac. I want to be using something native, something where all the other technologies we build can come into play in the experience. And we think Catalyst is going to set that off in a really great way for the Mac ecosystem.
Right. So they truly are native apps. So from
Absolutely.
the consumer side, it'll not be like, oh, I can tell that this is an iPad app running on the Mac, or maybe there'll be some kind of differentiation on the App Store. That'll be native Mac apps.
Oh, 100%. So these frameworks, we have you probably know all of our frameworks, but we have frameworks like Foundation, we have AppKit. UIKit is another framework that is now built natively on the Mac. It's interfaced with our underlying Windows Server and core animation system and other frameworks in the system in a completely native way. And we've integrated it with all the other sort of Mac-specific functionalities, pull-down menus, sidebars, system services, all of these things you get. So it's a 100% native framework. It's a different framework than AppKit, as you know. You're ending up with a UI view, not an NS view, but those are, at the end of the day, native core animation views working with the Mac Windows Server. It's a 100% native experience.
Right. So what would you say that constitutes, in 2019, what makes for an excellent Mac app?
I don't know. I mean, you guys are as valid a connoisseur as I am of that. And I think the great thing is about the Mac ecosystem and the iOS ecosystem is these are constantly evolving things. I mean, a Mac app that would have been a great thing in the era of Tiger is not the same thing as a Mac app today. I think Mac apps are high performance. I think they're a native app. It's taking advantage of all the system mechanisms that are making it have great battery life. You see people who will port an app to a platform using a non-native environment, and it runs, but it doesn't run well. It doesn't. It is tough on the battery. Look and feel is off. The widgets are off. The behavior around the clipboard and text selection and keyboard shortcuts and are not quite there, and you just feel at every step of the way that your expectations aren't really met, that your muscle memory doesn't work on those apps, and then they're just purely superficial things. Is where things are in the layout of the application where you expect? Do you find search where you expect? Do you find does the sidebar look and feel right? All of these elements of the app are part of a good experience, and then you want to integrate with all the other platform services. And since we're giving developers frameworks that themselves are pre-integrated into other elements of the Mac experience, if you build your iOS app on the Mac, you're picking up a lot of that for free.
Right. And it's interesting, I think you mentioned this, that it's not just that you're bringing your iPad app to the Mac, but in a way, it'll sort of also incentivize developers on the iPad to say, well, maybe I need to also make my iPad app great and support all of these modern features, because in a way, I'll be doing this for the iPad, I'll be doing this for the Mac at the same time.
100%. And that's what, we obviously knew where we were going several years back. And because some of these features for iPad and for the Mac, it's not a 1-year kind of engineering project to get all the way there. And so when it came to features like multi-window, and I'll say I always feel funny saying window on iPad, but for lack of a better term, the ability to have multiple documents, multiple instances of the application interface on the iPad available at once is something we've been working toward for a number of years. And as we saw that and Catalyst coming together on the Mac were going to enable a iPad developer to really do what we wanted for a Mac app and what would make a modern iPad app at the same time, that's just this wonderful confluence that we were able to work for and get it all to intersect this year.
Right, because you have these teams, like Twitter was an example at the keynote, that they can work on an iOS app. They have a team of people to that, but maybe they didn't have the resources to also have a native AppKit app. And so now they have a way to say, okay, we can make an iPad app and it also works on the Mac.
That's right. And this was in talking to the developers that we brought in over the last month to get started with Catalyst, this was a even greater factor than I think we anticipated, that for a team to make the decision, can we take the team we have and the code base we have with the expertise we have and do a little bit more work and create and target a platform like the Mac? That for them is an easy decision. One, they'll go, yes, let's do that. When you say, can you hire some people that have a slightly different set of expertise, that know AppKit, they don't know UIKit, that they might need to manage a different code base and try to evolve these two things together. That becomes a whole different proposition for them. And in many cases, they made the decision in the past just to focus on one. Given now this alternative with Catalyst, for some of them, it's just a no-brainer to go ahead and now support the Mac. So I think it's going to be huge.
Yeah, but this doesn't mean that AppKit is going away. Or
no.
You'll stick around. You'll still be able to make an AppKit app and have the same support as ever, and it's just a new way to make apps for the Mac.
Oh, absolutely. And we have a very an awesome AppKit engineering team. As you'll see if you attend any of the sessions here on AppKit, we continue to engineer enhancements to AppKit. And actually, when and I'm sure I hope we'll go there. When you talk about SwiftUI as a framework, SwiftUI, absolutely, AppKit is using AppKit controls in the context of a SwiftUI app is a completely first-class experience as well. So these frameworks remain vital into the future.
Right. So last about Catalyst, distribution methods. I believe you will be able, as a developer, to sell it on the Mac App Store, to make it available on the Mac App Store. And you can also release it on your own website, as long as you support notarization.
That's right. Yeah, so in that respect, apps built with Catalyst are no different than other Mac apps. It's essentially from the user's perspective or from the business model perspective, it's an implementation detail for the developer. So just as with other Mac apps, of course, we hope you sell them on the Mac App Store. We think that's the easiest, most trusted way to get apps. But if you want to sell them on your website or you want to do both, that's an option. And as we mentioned in the State of the Union yesterday afternoon, the notarization service is now the standard for Gatekeeper across the board, regardless of whether you built your app out of Perl scripts or AppKit or based on Catalyst.
Mm-hmm. And you guys are using Catalyst for podcasts, I believe.
That's right.
In Catalina.
That's correct.
I was able to take a look at music and podcasts next to each other, and I couldn't tell the difference.
Right.
And they're built using two different technologies. So it's like it feels amazing, like the progress that you were able to make compared to last year with the first version of News and Home, and look at podcasts, and it just feels like a regular Mac app with the excellent player toolbar and all the controls. It's really incredible.
Yeah, and the new Find My app is also based on Catalyst, and for us internally, the same kind of benefits of being able to have a single team that can focus on making one thing the best and release it across all our platforms makes a ton of sense for us as well. But another element actually, and I think we learned a lesson last year, many lessons with the first release of things like news and stocks and so forth. Some of the things that got written after we released those apps were attributed to where people said, "Oh, this doesn't feel right," like as a Mac app, were attributed to the underlying technology when in fact they were just design decisions. Certain things that the designers working on those apps at the time, a news team says, what do we want our news app to be like on the Mac? And sometimes they make certain choices, and some of the community said, well, those aren't the choices we think you should have made for the Mac. That wasn't dictated by the technology. That was just their vision of the app. And so we've made changes in those regards too.
Yeah, I can tell. All right, let's talk about SwiftUI.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to know what's the overall description that you would give for SwiftUI. It's a new UI framework based on Swift that has a declarative syntax with features like it's a compositional syntax, it's consistent and automatic. As long as I understand this stuff. So my first reaction was I was looking at screenshots of here's what some UI code looks like in SwiftUI. And I'm not a developer, I'm not a programmer, I don't code. I can follow the basic details. It looks so readable to me. It makes sense in a way that maybe CSS makes sense. Right. So what was the impetus for doing this?
SwiftUI is the wonderful confluence of a number of things. I myself worked in development frameworks and tools since pretty much the beginning of my career, and that's an area of huge passion for me. And very early on, many of us, including even going back as far as Next, really got into building declarative forms of building user interfaces. Because the most powerful thing you can do is tell the computer minimally what you want instead of how to do it, and let the framework handle doing the hard work for you. And so that was an idea that we were really eager to bring back to building UI frameworks for our platforms. And if you look at how this has been done historically in the web space, it's sort of a Frankensteinian assemblage of HTML technologies and JavaScript and maybe some client-side language like Java or Python. And we had this incredible asset. We had Swift, a language that we had created with these kinds of uses in mind, and that we could evolve to be the perfect language to accomplish what we wanted to do. And we also had an incredible set of developer tools and an incredible developers tools team that could work in concert. And when you can put together a great core set of concepts with the power to build just the language you want to express that and just the set of tools that come together, then the kind of magic that I think we've achieved with SwiftUI becomes possible. And so at its most basic form, we wanted to say, be able to write in the most minimal, clear, readable, expressible way what you want the interface to be, and have the system infer, okay, how am I going to get that done? If the UI changes, if the underlying state changes such that the UI contents changes from this to that, handle the animation automatically. If the system changes from light mode to dark mode, well, we understand what we should do with text when it goes from light mode to dark mode. We understand what we should do with the background from light mode to dark mode. Do the right thing. Because we don't have the developer overexpress themselves when creating the interface in the first place, all that's there are the semantics, and we can infer all the details and build the right interface for you. So the experience ends up being so much more fluid. And then you combine that with a set of developer tools where everything you type is instantly previewed. Right. Everything you change in the visual editor is instantly mirrored in code. Now you're not doing this experience where it's edit over here, recompile, rerun, or edit over here, reload a web browser. It's just one continuous experience. And when you make development that much more interactive, the productivity goes way up. But more importantly than that, the creativity goes up. Because what'll suck creativity out of you is when you're bogged down just with the mechanics. But when you can really just express yourself fluidly, that's when you go have the inspiration and the energy to just go try new things. And we think that's what SwiftUI is going to enable for the community. I mean, of course, it'll make development of UI more accessible to many people who maybe weren't approaching it before. And that's exciting because we're already seeing some of that with Swift and Swift Playgrounds. But even for the most experienced developers, giving them a tool that is that expressive and that interactive is going to mean they're just going to build better things. They're going to try out more ideas. And in the end, we're going to end up with better apps.
And you wouldn't say that this is a successor to UIKit. It's just a new option that developers have. They can start testing. They can start playing around with that, using it in maybe a couple of views inside of their apps. They don't have to commit to just say, my app needs to be all SwiftUI. They can do that if they want, but they can still keep using UIKit and SwiftUI.
Well, absolutely. And in fact, this technique really is how we approached the launch of Swift 5 years ago as well. We didn't say, hey, if you want to use this new language, throw away everything you did, start over. We said, hey, you can adopt this language incrementally in part of your app, try it out, expand over time. Or if you just want to learn this from the outset and build your app with this new technology from the outset, you can do that too. And so the way we built SwiftUI from the outset was not only can you build it incrementally within your app, but you can take existing controls you've already built. Maybe you've built a Photos app and you have this great photo editor, but now you want to put a different UI around it. You can, in an instant, wrap that user interface you've already built in SwiftUI. Or you can do the other. You can build a chunk of UI out of SwiftUI and insert it in the middle of a UIKit app. So this thing is completely fluid. And this also means that SwiftUI is able to take advantage of all of the existing controls in our system, both in UIKit and in AppKit across all our platforms, so tvOS and now watchOS. So just right out of the gate, you get this incredibly broad and mature set of technologies.
Like dynamic type, dark mode, all of these features that you get for free just by using SwiftUI.
That's right. And when we, for those of you who watched the event on yesterday morning, when we put up the code to create this table view, I think many people were probably going, that's way more code than that should take. And what's happened over time, but that UIKit code that we had up there, that's legit. I mean, when we really went and said, if we're going to handle dynamic type correctly, if we're going to handle all the auto layout, if we're going to handle right to left, if we're going to handle dark mode, and you end up writing all of those other things, that's actually what you end up with, right? And so developers over time, to support all the features, this stuff starts to add up. SwiftUI is like a great reset for that. Suddenly, it's just absolutely minimal, and you get all of this great capability. One thing that we didn't talk about that morning, but I think many have picked up on with SwiftUI, is that it also, because its animation system is implemented at such a core level, that the quality of the experience, it's not just that it's less code, but the quality of the experience is better. So all animations, for instance, are interruptible. If you've ever run an app and you tap and then, or start to drag, and then partway through you think, no, that's not what I want to do. And you try to turn it around. Yeah. But the app is like on rails. It says, oh, you tap the button, I'm going this way and I'm going to finish. And then when I'm done, we can talk about going the other way.
Yeah.
Well, in SwiftUI, the whole thing is 100% reversible. You start tapping this, it starts animating. You tap something else, it turns around from wherever it is and goes the other way. And the developer didn't have to do a thing to anticipate that circumstance. It just works.
And this also applies to watchOS. So you can, not only can developers make independent watch apps this year, I believe it's one of the major announcements.
Yes.
They can also create those apps using SwiftUI. So what do you think will be the impact on the watchOS ecosystem?
Well, I think it can be huge because, initially, I think there are parallels to be drawn. It's not a self-flattering parallel, but, when we first launched the iPhone, for a while, we had native apps that internally were built on UIKit, but the public framework when the iPhone first launched was, hey, you should build web clips, basically. Right. You should use HTML technologies. Those apps weren't first-class apps. For the watch, we did better than that, but the framework we provided for external developers up to now has not been the full-power native kind of framework that we use. And that has not stopped some developers from creating really compelling experiences on the watch, but it's not the same as having a true native framework. And now they have the best framework ever in SwiftUI. And so I think the combination of giving them this awesome native framework, an incredibly compelling set of developer tools to make them productive, and a whole bunch of core APIs, things like the ability to do background audio and things that enable whole ranges of experience, I think it just opens up the field for all kinds of new experiences on your wrist, and then the ability to actually have apps that are standalone, can be purchased right on your wrist. I think it could be a new era for apps on the watch.
That's awesome.
This episode of AppStories is brought to you by Linode. With Linode, you can instantly deploy and manage an SSD server in the Linode cloud. And you can get a server up and running in just seconds with your choice of Linux distro, resources, and node location. Linode has hundreds of thousands of customers, and they're all cared for by Linode's incredible 24/7 support team. If you've ever run into any problems, you can just drop them an email or give them a call or even just go chat on IRC in the Linode community if that's easier, whatever suits your needs. Oh, and you know what? They have super useful guides and support documentation. So if you just need to look at something quickly, you can. Linode's new management panel is now out of beta at cloud.linode.com. This new management console is a single-page application built using cutting-edge React.js stack and is backed entirely by Linode's public API. On top of that, it's open source. Plus, they feature two-factor authentication to keep you and all of your data safe and secure. We use Linux sometimes at MacStories for our projects, and it's been absolutely terrific. All right, I want to talk to you about a little bit about pricing because they've got great options. Linode has options to suit everybody's needs. Their plans start at 1 gig of RAM for just $5 a month, and they offer high memory plans starting with 16 gigs of RAM. And Linode has a special offer just for AppStories listeners. As a listener of this show, you can go to linode.com/AppStories and use the promo code AppStories2019 to get $20 towards any Linode plan. On the 1 gig of RAM plan, that's 4 free months. And with a 7-day money-back guarantee, you have nothing to lose. Give Linode a try today. That's linode.com/AppStories and the promo code AppStories2019 to learn more, sign up, and make the most of that $20 credit. Our thanks to Linode for their support of the show.
All right. Well, this may surprise you. I would like to talk about iPad.
That is a shocker. I got to say, reading some of your manifestos is a rare pleasure for me. It's sort of like a celebration at the end of a release. It really is. You ship the product, and then it's not quite done until you can spend a good 30 hours reading one of your write-ups on it. It's like. It's a full. You reach full closure. A sense that
my plan this time was to publish it before WWDC, so that people traveling could have something
to read on the plane. Yeah.
So I was optimistic. I was expecting a couple of changes. There's a new OS which is quite the departure from just a few changes.
Right.
iPadOS. What was the consideration in and why doing it now?
Yeah.
Because it's still iOS at the foundation.
Sure.
So what's the message sort of that you want to send by saying this is iPadOS now?
Well, we've had I think a consistent vision from the beginning with iPad that we've been able to steadily chip away at over many, many years as the hardware's become more capable, as the ecosystem has become broader. And, just to watch what you're doing with iPad is always pushing the limits of kind of what we can enable with the entire experience. And as we've worked on it, and as the nature of the iPad experience has become something really distinct from the phone. And, I talked about it a little bit when introducing the OS, that things like drag and drop, split view, slide over, Apple Pencil, these are things that really define a different way of working with the device. When I work on my iPad, I don't feel like I'm working on a big phone. I feel like I'm working on, or that I'm working on a Mac. I feel like I'm working on an iPad. And when you look at what we mean when we say macOS, or when we say tvOS, which is an iOS-based platform, or we say watchOS, which at its core is iOS, these things to us are definitions of experiences. There's a watchOS experience that's tailored for apps that make sense on your wrist. tvOS, a 10-foot UI that makes sense in that context. iPadOS has become a distinct experience. And we've been working our way there steadily over time. And with the work we did this year, we felt like we were at a place where this truly was a distinct thing, and a thing that we want developers, of course, as they have, but to emphasize that for a developer, you should be thinking distinctly about what are you doing to make this a great iPad app, not just an iOS app that works on iPad, but a great iPad app. And those things like supporting, if you're a document-based app, are you going to support multiple windows? Of course you should. Are you going to support drag and drop? Of course you should. That's what it means to be a great iPadOS app. And so we wanted to acknowledge what iPad has really become.
Yeah.
And honestly, how invested, of course, just to reaffirm for everyone how invested we are for it as a great and distinct platform.
Yeah. So it's really, I've seen some people say, oh, it's just a marketing message. I don't think that's it, really. It's because you can see already, even before iPadOS, you could see the features that are iPad only. Pencil, split view, now you have multiple windows. So I feel like saying, it's just a marketing name, that's really selling it short. It feels more than that.
Oh, I certainly, I'm with you on that for sure.
So before we talk about the features, sort of a big picture question. So you have this incredibly diverse iPad product line. You have the iPad mini, you have iPad, you have iPad Air, you have iPad Pro, all kinds of iPads for, I assume, all kinds of users. There's folks who use iPads, for example, maybe to watch movies or just to read books or play games. There's folks who maybe get some work done on them. There's folks who maybe use them as their primary computers and get, really professional work done on an iPad. So when designing new software features for iPad, how do you strike that balance of saying, we gotta be mindful about the fact that there's users who want simplicity, who want an intuitive UI, but there's also folks who want to use iPads in a way that is more complex or more professional, more advanced.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, iPad is often someone's very first computer experience. For many people, that may be their first experience when they're a child. For many elderly people, it's the first device that they ever really got acquainted with, if they missed the kind of computer revolution that you and I grew up with. And the device has always had that magical power to be so accessible to an incredible range of people. And so that's always in our minds when we design then more advanced features for users like yourself who are stretching it to the limits. And part of it is we want to make sure that the iPad always remains completely approachable, and that the power that is there doesn't manifest itself as complexity in the common things, that we can incrementally disclose more power without burdening the experience the entire way. And I'd offer several examples. So the Mac is inherently a multi-window system. If you get started on the Mac, it's pretty much impossible not to, a few minutes into using it, to have a bunch of windows up on the screen. And now you as a user are confronted with window management.
Yes.
If you use a Mac application and you load Pages or Microsoft Word and you get a little work done, you cannot avoid confronting where on the file system do I want to put something, and when I want to get back to it, how do I find it? Right. Where is it? Like all of that base complexity is sort of right there as a barrier to entry to even get started and understand your experience. And you see users who start using the system and you realize actually they're functional with the system, but they're fundamentally haven't fully understood even some of what they're dealing with and get themselves in trouble. Now this isn't pro Mac users, not a problem at all. It's an incredibly powerful tool, but for those people, it's a problem. With iPad, you start using it, you don't have to confront any of those problems. You use Pages, you create a document. Hey, where is it? It's in Pages. You move from app to app. Do I have any windows to clean up? Do I have to worry about when I quit something, whether it saved what I did? None of that is there. But if you want to take advantage of the file system, we have a way for you to do that. If you want to share files across applications, we have a way to do that. If you want to now work with multiple applications on the same screen or the same application, multiple instances, you can work your way into those experiences, but only when you're ready. And if that's not what you want to do, you're never confronted with that complexity. And so for us, that's sort of the requirement that we, and we talk about this all the time in our design meetings. We're saying, okay, let's think about this thing we're considering doing right here. How does this work when a young child first approaches this? How does this work when a non-sophisticated computer user first approaches this? On the other hand, let's say I'm a professional. For me, is it just as fast and fluid? Can I get into a pattern of use with the device that's great? And that's where keyboard accelerators, they don't hurt anybody if you don't use them, but if you're a pro, they are vital to being productive. And so things like that, we keep pushing on those.
Yeah. And the new multitasking with multiple windows, it feels like the perfect example for that kind of sort of progressive disclosure of power. You can now create multiple instances of the same app. You can see multiple documents at the same time. You can put the same app in multiple spaces.
Yes.
You can do multiple windows in SlideOver, multiple apps in SlideOver. What were some of the considerations behind all of this?
Oh, our everyday use. So iPad has rapidly become, for many of us at Apple, and certainly me personally, my most used device. I spend more minutes on an iPad than I do on my Mac, than I do on my phone. But there are some things where I found like I want to be using my iPad, but this is not so convenient. I have this one document I need to keep open. I'm going to be reading. This is a long thing. Maybe it's one of your articles. I want to keep it there. It's going to take me a few weeks to get through it all. And I want to put some notes next to it because, boy, there's some ideas and requests written in there that I got to get to.
I'm so sorry.
It's actually really a pleasure. But I don't want that to be like, now I have to make a decision. Like, do I want to do that or do I want to switch? If I want to use that app for something else, do I have to switch? This happens to me in mail all the time. And so these are the things where we say for ourselves, we want an experience where we can take that note or we can take that document and we can separate it off. We can put it next to another web page, but that doesn't disrupt the rest of what we're doing with the system. And so, I think that's core to how we do so many things at Apple. We're ultimately ourselves passionate users of the platform. We're building the things that we think make sense for us, make sense for our families, make sense for our friends, and this generally leads us to the path of building something that we feel really great about.
Yeah, Files also got a bit upgrade.
Yeah.
Column view, quick look, metadata, quick actions, zip and unzip, improvements all around, the context menu. It's really a massive update.
Yes.
How did it come to be?
Well, I'll say after the fact, I was reading your last article, going through the list, and with my with a check mark, with a list of check marks, and I'm like, hey, all right, I had there was a really good coincidence of
and USB access.
Yes, so external drives, we're willing to acknowledge the 1990s and go all the way back, and but people still use them sometimes. I'm an AirDrop fan myself, but I understand there are other uses. So but even big external drives, we know with photographers that the ability to import their photos directly into an app. Like Lightroom is so important. And so, and we have a lot of avid photographers. I mean, even Phil Schiller is just a huge photographer. And every time Phil goes on vacation, he sends us back his, I don't want to say list of grievances. Let's say productive suggestions for improvements to the platform. And so certainly all of that factors in. But yeah, files, I mean, even SMB server file support. So if you've got another computer at home on your network and you want to get to it, or in an enterprise context, you want to get it a work file server, finally, shared directories, shared folders in iCloud Drive, which is so huge for many uses. So this absolutely is a gigantic year. And there are even things that are more under the hood. You've written about security scope bookmarks and the ability to grant an app access to a larger part of your file system. Well, we've created new APIs under the hood there where when you grant, you can make that grant, and then the app actually gets essentially a native file system API to those folders, sort of a hole punched in the sandbox that's a bit more native than the means that they had to go through in the past to access and enumerate the contents of those. And so this will make it more easy for utilities and other apps to interact with that content in a very direct and native way. So yeah, we're going really deep here. And this is an area where what we do on the Mac has informed the iPad, and what we've done on iPad has informed the Mac in terms of security architectures. We brought our interface as we built these high-powered file system, the plugins for iPad. Now, we didn't make any noise about it at the conference, but we're exposing that as a first-class interface for people like Dropbox and Microsoft OneDrive and so forth to adopt as a more consistent, safe and stable way for them to integrate storage into the Mac. And so this is great for developers, one way to solve the problem, great for users, much more stable and supportable interfaces. So we have a great team working on files.
That's awesome. Shortcuts. Now built into, I have to
ask. I hear you use those a little bit.
Just a little. Built into iOS 13 and iPadOS. Yes. What's the response been like since last year?
Oh, really good. I mean, I think Shortcuts is this amazing way of filling in all the gaps and orchestrating pieces that in the past on iPad were separate. And so if you have a powerful use case you want to orchestrate, I think Shortcuts has a unique ability to fill those needs. One feature we did add to Shortcuts, I don't know if anyone sent you a special note or anything. You've long been saying, hey, can you come up with a better, more structured way for applications to express functionality that could be accessed with shortcuts instead of using URL schemes. We've done that this year.
Okay, thank you.
And so, you're very welcome. And so that's going to be super powerful. We've also, brought the worlds of Shortcuts and HomeKit together, because you think about Shortcuts are this awesome way of expressing powerful automations. And HomeKit is an environment where you have things you want to automate and triggers for automation. And so now we're both enabling you to write shortcuts of any kind that manipulate all of your HomeKit accessories, but also to use shortcuts as a way to define the automations that happen in your home. So if you want to say, hey, when I get home or when I open the door, I want to do a check and say, well, if the lights are already on and bright, then leave them alone. But if they're not, take them up to 50%. And all this kind of logic that you might want to express in a sophisticated home automation, you can now do it with the consistent experience of the Shortcuts editor. So it's a great year for bringing those things together.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome that you're allowing third parties to integrate more deeply with it. Yeah, and especially because there's been so many workarounds today. There's folks using the clipboard or URL schemes, but I think having a native solution that I assume there will be some kind of permission-based system,
right.
And using Siri shortcuts under the hood, it feels like really a great opportunity for developers to say, yes, we want to integrate with shortcuts. We want to let users, use our actions and actually save more time when getting work done.
Yeah, and in many cases, expressing a capability to shortcuts opens the door both for powerful voice automation as well as powerful scripting. So
right.
if we have the support now for shortcuts to express that they have follow-up parameters that they want to express. So if you map a voice shortcut to something, but there are various questions that have to be sort of filled in to complete the task, those are expressed in a consistent way, whether that's something you're going to activate by way of a shortcuts script that you write, or whether through Siri you make that request and then it knows, oh, I need to follow up and ask you, what do you want to do for this parameter? This parameter, it doesn't say parameter in this case, but what do you want to do for this setting, this setting, this setting? So that came together in a wonderful way.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, I think we're running out of time. Any other cool iPad feature that you didn't get to mention during the keynote? Is there anything that you would like to call out? There was an effort.
Gosh, that's a heck of a question.
Fonts, maybe?
Oh, well, of course. I mean, there are things that I talked about in the context of the presentation where, fonts have been something that you could build into a single app. But of course, if you're working on a project, you want to bring your own choice of fonts. You don't want that to have to be something that the particular app had to pre-integrate. And so now we've been able to bring those to the App Store. You can install your fonts, and then any app you're using can access fonts. So I think that's all part of making the iPad and apps on the iPad just have that kind of flexibility that we've all been looking for. So I hope as you write your roundup for 2019 for our releases that I know sometimes you go pretty deep. I think you're going to find a lot there to write about.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's it. I want to thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on AppStories. And thank you for iPadOS. Personally speaking, I'm so happy to see all of these changes. It's been a fantastic week here at WWDC. Till next time, thank you again, Craig.
All right. Well, thank you. We thought about you a lot while working on this OS, so it's really great to hear that it resonates with you like we hoped.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm back with Federico.
Hello.
That was an amazing interview. What was it like?
I still can't believe that it actually happened. So it was, extremely fun and informative, and it's just such a privilege, really, to be able to ask questions to a person in the position to actually answer all of my questions. And we were used to seeing Craig on stage, cracking a few jokes, but really he's an extremely smart person that truly knows what they're doing at Apple. And so it's the kind of opportunity that might never present itself again.
Right.
So I'm extremely happy that we were able to make this happen, this very special AppStories episode. It is not what we were planning in terms of WWDC coverage, but I think it all worked out for the better. And we have the whole summer to actually talk about iOS 13 and iPadOS and all the great changes.
We do. And, we'll be back next week and we'll start doing that right away. And we'll probably put that episode out maybe a day, maybe 2 days later than the usual Monday.
Yeah, please forgive my jet lag, but I'm sure that I will be in extremely bad conditions coming back to Italy. So give me a couple extra days.
All right, I'll give you a couple extra days. Yeah. And that'll be good though, because it gives us a little time to absorb what we've learned this week.
Install the betas,
and start talking about it all. I'm looking forward to it.
Perfect.
Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.